I'm going to explain why you feel absolutely exhausted even when you haven't done anything. And I'm not going to tell you how to rest better or convince you that something is wrong with your dopamine. There is a real reason why you're so tired. And once you see it, it's going to make a lot of sense. For years, I really believed that I was just a very low energy person. I felt like I had 1 or 2, maybe really good hours in me, like hours to really get something done and to accomplish things. But the rest of the time, I had this deep yearning to be horizontal. I wanted to lay down. From the age of 15 probably on, I needed a nap every single day. Not wanted, needed a nap. Like when I would wake up in the morning, all I was thinking about was when I was going to be able to get back into bed. I remember a time when my sister came home from college and she was so happy that I actually stayed with the family instead of what she referred to as like escaping into my room to take a nap, because that was taking 2 to 3 hours out of every single day. It was crazy how normalized that had become for me. I didn't really understand why that was so necessary for me. So let's talk about where that energy is actually going. Because the way I see it is that we actually have 2 drains on this energy, not just one. The first one I see as an internal energy. Now, this is going to be especially relevant if you have a sensitized nervous system. If you are not sure if you do, I have a quiz that you can take and it'll tell you really quick. But your body is running survival operations nonstop when you are sensitized. So there's a lot going on inside with the scanning for threat, bracing, monitoring, and staying really ready. That's something that's happening internally. It never turns off. It's constantly looking for and interpreting as if there is danger constantly. This isn't something that you've necessarily chosen. Obviously, it's something that has developed over time as you've become more and more sensitized and as your nervous system has moved into this severely sensitive state. You can't see it. It's just running. I liken this to, have you ever had like an iPad or a phone and you're like, where is this battery going? I just charged it. I just took it off the charger and it's dying. It's at 4%. What happened? And you don't realize that there have been apps that have been running in the background, and those apps have been constantly refreshing. They're constantly refreshing. They're constantly trying to see if there's any new information. So because of that, it's just silently draining that battery behind your awareness. That's what I see as that internal energy drain. Your battery is still dying even though you don't feel like you're actually using that energy. It's very, very sneaky. The other drain is an external energy drain. This is the one you have a bit more of control of, and it's the direction that I encourage people to move in, that we deal with the external energy drain before the internal energy drain, because the internal one in time will just take care of itself. You don't have to really do too much with that. With the external energy drain, we're looking at whatever energy you do have left. You're spending it on trying to fix the problem from the outside. This is something we get really, really into when we have chronic symptoms, chronic anxiety, chronic pain, chronic issues going on, is we dive deep into researching and monitoring these symptoms and worrying and looping and trying to solve and trying to figure it out. We're very busy looking outside of ourselves to deal with that internal alarm that's going on, and that tanks your energy. It's very exhausting. There are 2 things here. One of them is by your system and the other is by you. So the internal drain is like that quiet battery being just siphoned in the background. And this other one is, I am now actively doing things that are incredibly draining. I remember how draining I felt being in Facebook groups. Oh my gosh. And it was both. It was like I felt so drained, but I felt absolutely wired. As you can see there, my external behavior, as far as the researching and reading every post that I could find and going down these rabbit hole of threads, was also draining the internal battery. So we're getting drained on both sides. And our external behaviors a lot of the time affect that internal drain as well and kind of speed up how quickly that is emptied. Something I want to talk about with the energy drains is why, when you are beginning to recover from these things, it can feel very, very slow at first. When you are desensitizing and changing your response to your symptoms, that takes energy. It absolutely does. And right now, both of your tanks are most likely nearly empty. You don't have the internal energy because you're constantly bracing. It's burning up energy that it doesn't really have. And then the external tank of all your busyness, staying very busy trying to solve, has tanked that energy source as well. So the beginning of this process is going to be the hardest because you are going to have the least amount of energy or capacity or resilience, whatever you want to call it, to work with. You have very, very little available to you. So I'm asking you to do things where you're like, I don't even have the energy to do that stuff because I'm already so drained. And we kind of just have to work with what we've got in the beginning, which is why your body can kind of fight and push back because it's trying to conserve its resources. It's trying to be as efficient and effective as it can, but it's working with nothing. It's working with these reserves that aren't ever really refilling. They're never being filled back up. We're just constantly living at this very low level of energy and then blasting through that instantly within hours of the day, within the first couple hours of waking up, if we even have it to start with. But the energy begins to come back. And that's a very exciting part of this process that I want to talk a little bit more about. I want to explain to you why, even though it feels really hard in the beginning, it's going to begin to snowball for you. As you begin responding differently, the external drain of energy is going to be the first thing that slows for you. Once you stop looping, monitoring, researching, and trying to solve so much, you're going to have more external energy. And that settling is going to start to quiet the internal alarm. So the internal alarm going down is going to mean that your body will stop burning energy on survival. And now both of your tanks are going to refill instead of both of them draining. As you have the external energy, because you're no longer using that energy on trying to figure it out and researching and going deep and following down these rabbit holes, you now have that external energy to direct somewhere else. And when you direct that energy toward responding differently, the internal energy is going to raise because the internal alarm is going to lower. More energy for you means a better response. And that means you'll have more energy freed up to use, which is going to mean in time, an even better response. The two things that were working against you, which was that lack of capacity, lack of energy, lack of resources, they start working together. And that's when it starts picking up speed. And you'll start noticing that everything snowballs because things will start to get a lot easier. There is upfront work, yes, 100%. And there's going to be work throughout the whole journey, but it looks different and it changes and it shifts. And I have found that it gets to a point where all of a sudden it really starts picking up speed. And I believe that has to do with these energy reserves being higher so that you have better energy to respond better, more energy to re-engage with your life, to pour into things that matter to you. And you'll reach a point where you can literally have no response at all to the things that used to absolutely wreck you. And so we work at getting a better and a better response until in time, things will pop up and they won't take any of your attention. That is the ultimate response. That's what we're aiming for, but it takes a little while to get there. I have more energy now than I've ever had in my entire life. I'm not getting, I mean, maybe I have the amount of energy I used to have when I was 14 or 13, but even then I was really low on energy. There was a lot that was pulling on what I had to give, the offer that I had as far as energy every single day. So I feel like I'm in a better spot now, energy-wise and focus-wise than I've ever been able to maintain in my life. I know I used to dream about waking up with energy in the morning and having that same energy by dinner time. And that is a dream that I am now actively living because the energy is not being drained in the background or in the foreground anymore the way that it was. I noticed that my energy and my focus and my attention were the number one resource that I had available to direct somewhere. And I realized that there was so much of that I was directing into things that were actually fueling the internal alarm and draining my internal battery as well. This was a huge shift that I made. That is my life now. It is waking up in the morning with energy, not needing a nap. However, I do love naps. I love a good nap, but I don't need one anymore. And that is freeing because you don't want to feel like you have to have that rest. Otherwise you can't function. And little by surely we are retraining this to hold more energy, to hold more capacity, to be able to grow what we have to to use throughout the day. And a lot of that is us giving it back to ourselves. And then knowing that the internal energy is going to refill by itself because it's going to stop scanning all the time because you have stopped signaling that danger alarm. This is where it all goes. This is where it gets a lot lighter for you and it feels a lot easier. And I want you to especially pay attention to what is in your control. At this point, if you are sensitized, it's not completely in your control really at all what's going on internally for you. You cannot control how you feel internally. You cannot control the panic. You cannot control symptoms that show up. The thing that you control is your reaction to them. And as you control your reaction to them, you utilize what energy you currently have in your response, whatever your energy is at right now. I want to be explicit in saying that. That's going to look different for everybody. Whatever that energy is, you start using that in a new response. And then we're redirecting that energy. We're utilizing it in a different way. And then the threat internally is going to come down and the battery and the energy internally is going to go up. And then you are going to feel so resourced to be able to respond differently to these things. And then slowly over time, the system desensitizes. You have more resilience. And then you don't get thrown off. You don't have these chronic symptoms. Everything gets better. But this is the way that we walk through to that. So I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any thoughts on this and let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye, everyone.